Okay, so imagine sitting in class with your favorite professor, like one that I've had, Professor Spitza. You love her jokes, you love her example and her perspective. Sitting in class with her is always a joy. But imagine sitting in class with your favorite professor for every class all day long. What about every semester, or even all 4 years? Professor Spitza probably doesn't even seem great anymore. That's funny because the idea of having the same professor for every single class, every day, every semester, all 4 years is ridiculous. We take classes with different professors and we take general education courses so we can approach the problems in our jobs, in our lives, and in our worlds with expertise from many disciplines and perspectives from many different people. We prepare our students that way by diversifying their educations. We prepare them for success that way. We value creative problem solving made possible by varied backgrounds, except for some reason in the area that it matters most, which is our government, specifically our Congress. As a political science student, I've studied Congress extensively, and I've learned that in a study done by Princeton University about voting, the participants chose the incumbent candidate over 70% of the time. Instead of widening the assets of our Congress, the incumbents who have the clear advantage of lack of competition and name recognition linger indefinitely. These reasons, among several others, are why in this speech I'll convince you that congressional term limits are absolutely necessary, that there is a good plan for them, and that the plan does work. So to begin, like I said, congressional term limits are absolutely necessary, and I'm going to focus on 3 reasons why. The first one being, it acts as a vehicle for the spread of creative and innovative ideas. So let me give you an example. We've all heard of TED Talks. As students, we've all had to watch them in class, and as professors, you've probably shown them to your class 2 or 3 times. But something you probably don't know is that TED Talks are watched at a rate, according to TED, of 1.5 million times per day. That's a new showing starting every 17 seconds. Why are they so popular? Why do we watch them so much? Well, their motto explains it all. TED specializes in ideas worth spreading. Not okay ideas, not even good ideas, but creative and innovative ideas. We live in a world and in a society that values creativity and innovation, and TED's success illustrates that point exactly. But like that Princeton University study showed, we're voting for the person that is already in office most of the time. And that isn't to say that they don't already have good ideas, but by not having term limits, we're restricting the ability of other people to get in and also contribute with theirs. The second reason we need congressional term limits is because of principle. The 22nd Amendment of the Constitution sets 2 term limits on the office of president, and they do it for a reason. Obviously, we don't have that for Congress, but it should be restricted for the same reasons that president is, to restrict their power and prevent corruption. Based upon principle, the double standard makes no sense. It should be even more important for the people who make our laws to have their power restricted and their corruption restricted as well. The third reason why we need congressional term limits is for the sake of diversity. Although it has gotten better over time, Congress has historically been filled with white males and little else. According to the American Center for Women in Politics, women make up barely, our current Congress, 19% of the representatives. And minorities are also underrepresented. As you can see in this chart from the Pew Research Center, the bottom line is the percentage of whites in the U.S. population, and the top line is the percentage of whites in Congress. And as you can see, there's a large gap between the two. Whites are overrepresented, meaning that minorities are underrepresented. So based upon the spread of ideas, principle, and diversity, it's clear that we need congressional term limits. But as we know, things are easier said than done. If we did do it, what would it look like? So the plan is a constitutional amendment for 2 terms for the Senate and 3 terms for the House, which that seems like very few terms, but if you think about why, it actually makes sense. So Edward Crane, former president of the Cato Institute, was a huge advocate for 2 and 3 term limits for the Senate and House, respectively. In his article on the subject, he said that representatives with fewer terms would be nearer to their lives away from DC and their lives in the private sector, therefore being closer to their constituents' needs. He also said that the current system attracts people who want to do politics as a career instead of those who would be more likely to do it as a sense of civic duty or something. With term limits, they would feel like they would be more able to do the things that they needed to do in less time, and that they could still make a difference and even get in. So far we know why we need term limits and how we would do it, but the most important thing is the effects. Would it even work if we did do it? So, to keep things simple, let's look at the closest thing we can to compare it to, which is the states. So, 15 states in the United States have had term limits on their legislatures. According to the Cato Institute, California, in their first year after instituting term limits, had 30% new legislatures, again, in their first year. And that's a very important number, because that number still allows many people to be in there that are still experienced, but it also allows more ideas to be added from new people that could probably not have gotten in before. In an article from Rutgers University, Oregon and Michigan saw an increase of women elected, but the greatest strides were made for minorities. Arkansas and Michigan, in the same article, had an increase in minorities in the legislature, and they even took seats that had been dominated by whites for decades or more. The article even said the gain for minorities in races for term-limited seats was proportionately greater. So, in conclusion, term limits are absolutely necessary. We need to extend the spread of ideas already happening in our society to our government, and based upon principle and tradition, they are just to restrict power and corruption. It would also help increase diversity to match our expanding world. Term limits best accomplish these three goals by having few term limits, like 2 and 3 for the Senate and House respectively. When implemented in the states, term limits affected those very aspects that we talked about. So, how can we get them? Well, what you can do is you can add to the ideas in our society that's already happening. Contact your representative and tell them what you want to see. Because just like in our universities, we would never want to have the same professor for 4 years. And in other areas like sports, sometimes we just get tired of seeing the New England Patriots at the Super Bowl. It happens. So, because as we have seen, too much of even a good thing can actually turn out to be a bad thing. Thank you.